Okay, so the course structure then, what I'm going to cover today, and I'm going to start with what we mean by learning agility because it's a relatively new term. And rather than look at a definition, we'll talk about the different elements of it. I'll do a little bit on why it's important to employers and therefore important to you. I'll address the issue of improving your learning agility. Is it something? And sorry, I'm mixing up that word, and you'll see why later on. But improving your learning agility, is it possible? Is it worth it for you? And I'll finish off with a little bit on how employers might assess your learning agility and how to demonstrate it at interview. And that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? About being able to talk at interview about it. So I'm going to start with something that happened to me quite a few years ago. And no, that is not me in the picture, and it's not Karen either, you might have guessed. Um, but it's something actually that happened to a friend. So a friend of mine had got a new job, and she was showing me the new job description, the job that she was going to. And I had been working with her for a long time, so I knew what her current job was. And I looked at the new job description and I said, and truthfully, a bit doubtfully, gosh, there's an awful lot on there that you've never done before. And she looked at me with a big smile on her face and she said, yeah, think of how much I am going to learn. I can't wait. And it really struck me that it was such a fantastic attitude to have. You know, the newness of it didn't strike terror in her. She didn't think, I can't do this. It's way outside of my comfort zone. She automatically thought, look at how much I can learn. And she was looking at it in terms of the benefits to her. And I have to say that I learned a lot from that incident and it really stayed with me. This is quite a few, a number of years ago. And I think that it demonstrated to me at that time what learning agility is all about. And it wasn't a term that I knew at that time. But it was certainly an attitude that I could recognize. And I think that it is important to think about learning agility as that attitude. It's an attitude that leads to behaviors. So that willingness to look at those new things as an opportunity to learn also leads to a willingness to try out those new things, maybe completely changing the way that you've done things in the past and very much stepping out of your comfort zone. So you'll see some of those things there on the slide. Learning agility is about that attitude, that willingness to learn, having a curiosity for new things, being open to trying new things, and a willingness to step out of your comfort zone. So when I think of that situation, I was assessing my friend's ability based on what I already knew that she could do. So I knew that she was extremely capable at her job. I'd already seen that, I was witness to that. And I was basing that on my knowledge of how well she could do her job and how well she demonstrated her ability or even her capability. What I wasn't taking into account was her agility, how well she was able to deal with entirely new situations. So, ability is very much based on a knowledge of your past experiences, how well you've succeeded in the past. But then, how well do you succeed when put into an entirely new situation where you can't rely on your past successes, when you don't know what to do? So, that movement towards knowing what to do when you don't know what to do is about agility rather than ability. So when you're faced with a new situation or a new problem, your attitude is that you will be able to figure it out. You will use the skills and the resources and the knowledge that you have already had to learn how to deal with this new situation. So it's not that you're dismissing your past experience and skills and things. It's really about using that knowledge, using those skills, using that experience from the past to be able to move forward. And Scott Drew from the University of Michigan says that ability takes you to a certain point and then agility becomes more important. So I said to you that, I'll probably mix up ability and agility, but there's the difference between them. So, I also said that I'd talk to you about different elements of learning agility. And to do that, I'm going to use the 9 dimensions of the Burke Learning Agility Inventory. So, this is about trying to measure learning agility. But I thought that I would use it just to cover some of the different aspects of it. So, it's a sort of thing that employers might use to test people's learning agility. Maybe even whenever you're actually working in a company, it's maybe used sometimes to be able to look at, what needs developed in the team, what sort of ethos there is in the team in terms of working outside of comfort zone and all of that kind of thing. But I'm using it today just to look at the different aspects of it to give you some idea of what's included in when we're talking about learning agility. So the first one up there is speed. So acting on ideas quickly so that those ideas that are not working get discarded quickly. And you move on to what are new possibilities? What are the other new possibilities that might prove to be a good solution? It allows you to pivot quicker, to grow faster, and that word pivot also being very on trend at the minute. So, if you link that with learning agility as well. So, being able to rapidly grasp new ideas. Another dimension is flexibility, and that's all about being open to new ideas and coming up with new solutions. Now, in order to come up with those new solutions, you will probably want to do some inquiring, which is our next one, or experimenting. By doing that, you'll be trying out new behaviors and finding out what is effective. So it's looking for new ways of doing things. It's also about trying them out as well to challenge things. The next dimension then is risk taking. And some of you might already be shuddering at the words risk taking because we're certainly not all natural risk takers. But it's not necessarily about seeking new activities, that are sort of make or break risks. It might just be about looking at smaller things that, provide opportunities to be challenged around. It could be about allowing you to open your mind up to new thoughts and ideas. And I think that sometimes the terminology is off putting. So the term risk taking sounds a lot scarier than, seeking out new challenges might be. Not for some of you. Some of you might look at risk taking who are very much in terms of learning agility able. You might look at that and think, fantastic, that's all about me. I'm all over that. But some others will go risk taking. That's not really my style. But think of it, forget that terminology. Think of it in terms of, all of us have to do new things. All of us have to try out new things. Think about when you've done that, okay? So it's about seeking out new challenges and working with those new challenges. So sometimes we're doing these things, but not using that terminology, not recognizing that we're already doing it. So if you don't see yourself as a risk taker, think about times when you have sought out new challenges, big or small, and recognize that that was indeed a bit of risk taking. And I suppose that's the same for many of these things as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be the same terminology, but think about how you can relate it to your own activities. So the next one then, growth oriented or seeking feedback. So asking others for feedback on your ideas and on your overall performance increases our ability to learn because it's always good to hear what other people have to say. It's not always easy to hear it. And I suppose there's the crux of the matter because sometimes we'll hear negative feedback, but often that's what we grow from. If we really do take that on board as serious feedback, then we can really learn, we can really grow from that. So for us to learn and develop, we have to be able to take on feedback about how we're doing. And we also have to do it without being defensive about how we do things. If you're seeking feedback, then you have to look at that in a positive way. You have to say, this is a good learning experience for me. It's not about me defending myself here. So, moving on to the dimension of reflecting, then, taking time to analyze and evaluate your performance in order to be more effective. So once you've received that feedback, you need to be able to reflect on the feedback. And as I said, that means both positive and negative feedback. And having reflected on that feedback, you might then choose to act on it and adjust your behavior accordingly. Okay, so the next one then is information gathering or research. And that's all about expanding your knowledge, staying current, or indeed ahead of the game in your area of expertise. So, you're all studying a specific subject. Maybe when you move into work, you'll be looking at something even more specific or maybe broad. It's really up to you then to keep expanding on your knowledge, to keep researching what's the best, way to do these things. It might be in terms of um, practical applications. It may be new research around things, new theories, but it's up to you to keep up to date with those things. And then we have the dimension of collaborating, finding ways to work with others that generate unique opportunities for learning. Now, collaborating with others is something that employers will often ask you about, anything about working in a team. But being able to work with different working styles and making the most of other people's knowledge and skills as well as your own is, a form of learning agility as well. So that collaboration. And then the final dimension that I have up here is interdependence. And you can see that the figure says asking for and receiving help. But there's more to it than that, I think. So being able to admit mistakes and seek help when you've, when something's gone wrong. I think that's one that also goes into values here. I think, around integrity. And I've seen many examples of people who have not been willing, or perhaps I should say, maybe not able to be able to own up to mistakes. But we know that we can't take risks without making mistakes, and we can't progress without being able to take risks. And therefore, making mistakes, is an important part of that learning agility. It's definitely one of those things that employers like to question you on. Tell me about your biggest mistake. They don't want to know what the biggest mistake was as such. They want to know how you handled it. What did you learn from it? What was your thinking around it? Were you trying to make progress? And as a team member or as a team leader, being open to admitting your mistakes can encourage other people in the team to take risks without fear of repercussions, if it doesn't go well. So admitting to mistakes and being able to ask for help is part of that learning agility. So maybe now in the future, you might find it easier to ask for help or to own up to making mistakes if you see it as all part of that learning agility, if you can actually see that positive, aspect of it. Now, of course, it's also a two-way thing. So when a team member makes a genuine mistake, you also have to be positive and accept the mistake appropriately. And that again, that's about that collaboration and that team working as well. So there's the 9 different sort of dimensions around learning agility. As I said, it's from an inventory, but I put it there for you to be able to look at the different aspects of it. Some of them you might sort of go, yeah, I'm definitely good at this, I'm definitely good at that. But, look at where you can find examples of how you're actually able to work through some of these things. A lot of them do come up in some format in, as I said, the actual questions that are asked about an interview. But if you think about it as well, if you look at it in terms of just trying to get progression in a job that you might be in, or look at it in terms of being in an assessment centre, those are the sort of things that you would be assessed on as well. Not necessarily things that we often think about, but very important things and more and more important to employers. So we all know that there used to be such a thing as a job for life. Often people would start a job at the early stage of their career and they may remain in the exact same job throughout their career or maybe move up within the same company. Nowadays, that's much more unusual. Most graduates will have numerous jobs in different companies, probably in different, across different sectors as well, not just stay within the same sector for their career lifetime. Certainly, the technologies, the skills, and the knowledge that you will use in different jobs throughout your lifetime will change dramatically and change much quicker than they did in the past. In order just to be able to keep on top of things, you have to continue to learn and you have to continue to adapt. And when you stop doing that, then you stop progressing. And from a company point of view, if you have a workforce that has stopped learning, that cannot react to change quickly, that cannot come up with new solutions to new problems, new strategies for new markets, etc., then the company will also stop progression. And these days, no company can afford to do that. So employers want to hire people that are comfortable with continually learning new things and being open to new ideas. So perhaps at this stage of your life, if you're just finishing your degree or your postgraduate qualifications, you're able to demonstrate a lot of new learning at this point in your career. But as time goes on, be aware that you want to be able to continue to do that through, perhaps online learning, through development, through your own work, through project based things, taking on new things. I'll move on to that now anyway. But it's very much a case of learning never ends. And you need to remember that. You need to keep always moving with it. So then I wanted to move on to, can you develop your learning agility? Because I have talked about it being an attitude. And so I do think that it does take some effort to be able to do it. It's not a question of I can just get a book on it and read up on it, and that'll be me all sussed on learning agility. It requires you to be active in doing it. So the thinking seems to be that you develop learning agility. Not quite the same thing, for example, as IQ, where you have it. This is something that you can develop. You don't learn it from a book, but you do it with intention, with an open mind, and a willingness to continually learn. So some things there from the slide. Seek out new and diverse experiences because, if it's something new, then you will always learn something new. But of course, to do that, you have to also be aware of the learning around it. So seek out new and diverse experiences. Immerse yourself in situations that that are going to prove to give you some newness, something new that you can always continually learn from. Maybe broaden your perspective on things. Maybe broaden your skills. Certainly give you, something new that you can talk about and maybe progress to something else then. So embrace challenges and indeed take on challenges that scare you. And that way you know for a fact that you're working outside of your comfort zone. If you're scared to do something, then chances are you're moving outside of your comfort zone. Now, I'm not suggesting that you throw caution to the wind here. We're all about safety as well. You do have to be sensible too, but you can try out new things in a measured way. Embrace the unfamiliar. Remember that story that I told you at the start about my friend at the beginning of the session? She said, look at how much I am going to learn. Okay, so don't always go with your first solution. Consider if it is truly the best option or the easy or the familiar option, because sometimes that's what we'll automatically go for. Could you look at the situation creatively and do something different? All of that sort of thing would be great to be able to talk about at interviews. Maybe try out a new approach. If, for example, you are normally data driven, maybe you can get your hands on some experience instead, some hands-on experience, I should say, instead of just being, looking at the data on it. Just to give you that sort of different perspective that you maybe wouldn't normally have, and possibly a different solution as well. Stay curious, keep asking why, keep asking how, keep asking why not, and actively listen to others because that's where you'll learn so much from. You know, really learn from your experiences. When I talk to people about trying to link their experience with interview questions around things like challenges, problem solving, creative solutions, I often find that although they're doing all of these things, because we all do just to get through life, we all have to come up with solutions and we all face challenges, all the time. But they don't necessarily connect that with the terminology. You know, they get on and they do things, but they don't necessarily say, "Yeah, that was a challenge," or "That was a problem that I solved." And sometimes it's just about making those connections. They just see it as getting on and doing, rather than linking it with some of these phrases. And it's only when you really begin to question someone about their experiences that they realize that, yes, of course, that actually was a challenge and I dealt with it. So it's really important that we reflect on our experiences, that we learn from them, and that we, acknowledge that we're learning all the time. And we have so much to learn. So, you need to take note of how you are actually learning. What skills are you developing? And how are you honing those skills? How are you honing that knowledge down? A lot of what we seem to do almost by osmosis. It's not necessarily about reading something or whatever, but you just do it as you go through life. So unless you reflect on it, you don't really acknowledge that. So take time to reflect, maybe to make notes. For example, what did you learn about yourself from the last group project that you did? How did you work with other people? How could you have done better in it? Don't leave it till the end of the year or don't leave it till an upcoming interview to reflect on the situations that you find yourself in. So don't wait until the end of the project to figure out what you're learning. Maybe, reflect with others, talk about what it is that's currently working well and what isn't working well, ask for feedback and be open to criticism. And that's the important thing. Be open to negative feedback. It's never easy to hear criticism, and we don't always agree with it either. Um, but think of it as some of the best learning that you can receive for free. An opportunity for you to develop. And if you really don't agree with the criticism, then you can ask questions around it. How should I have done it differently? So ask clarifying questions so that you can learn more about, how you could improve. But don't argue about the feedback. Don't be defensive about it. And that's another sort of question that interviewers ask as well. What was the last negative feedback that you got? How did you take that? And that's the sort of thing that I want you to think about there, that learning experience from it, not being defensive, maybe asking clarifying questions and things. It may be very tempting to defend your actions, but that sort of closes off the opportunity for the feedback and for the learning from it. So take it on board, reflect on it, and learn from it. And learn to rely on your intuition. Okay? When you're faced with something new, look for similarities between what's happening now and things that you've done in your past. Look at these similarities to frame the new challenges. So you're faced with something. Have I come up with, have I met any of that sort of thing before in my experience? I'm currently reading Agatha Christie's Miss Marple's short stories. And as I was, putting these slides together, it really struck me that that's exactly what she does every single time. She looks at what she recognizes from her experiences that she's had in the past and relates that to what's happening in the present problem situation. And of course, she always solves the mysteries. Now, we can't all be Miss Marple, but it is about learning from our previous experiences. How can we link that to what's currently happening? And sometimes, rather than overthinking a situation, it can be good just to try something out and see if it works. So, experiment a bit. For example, you don't know if you're going to like the taste of something until you actually try it. So the experimenting end of things can be just as good as that, you know, spending an awful lot of time thinking about something and maybe not hitting the right solution after all. So that's one of the ways of looking at the problem as well. So different ways there to develop your learning agility. And I think a lot to think about there in terms of what an employer will want from you as well. So demonstrating your learning agility then. If learning agility is about knowing what to do when you don't know what to do, or indeed knowing how to learn, then how do we demonstrate our learning agility? Well, if you're going to do some of the things that I suggest in the previous slide to develop your learning agility, then you're also going to have the personal experiences to demonstrate that to employers. So, if it's take on new experiences, seek things outside of your comfort zone, get feedback from people, then those are ways that you can demonstrate to employers your learning agility. So, in order to demonstrate your learning agility, you want to be able to show that you question the status quo, that you're not always going with the way things are, but that you're looking forward, that you find new ways of doing things, that you process data quickly to identify patterns in complex problems or situations, that you can take calculated risks, that you're willing to move outside of your comfort zone, that you work on your own development because it is always about constantly learning, and that you seek feedback and that you use that feedback. And lastly, there, that you learn from your mistakes. And remember, you can talk about your mistakes in a really positive way by showing yourself as, a calculated risk taker and as someone willing to try something new and then learn from it. Try to explore a few what ifs to show what you can learn from the situation. So, what if this had happened instead? Or what if we try this instead of this? Okay, so folks, that's me finishing with the topic really. I'm going to move on to the interview questions and things. So if anybody wants to put any questions in, now's a good time and I can get back to them then.
We haven't got anything in the chat so far, Roisin. I think people are just all ears at the minute.
Processing. So yeah, but now, if you've got any questions, if you've thought of anything you'd like to ask myself or Karen, or indeed anybody else taking part is also willing to, able to answer the questions too in the chat. So I'll move on to the questions then that you might get asked at interview. And always before I do that, I always try to explain the STAR technique for effectively answering your interview questions. Apologies to those who have heard me do it many times before, probably. But basically, you want to be able to tell the interviewer your story by putting your answer into a nice, clear context for them. So when you're formulating an answer for your interview, try and follow the STAR technique. It makes your answers clear and logical, and it means that you're getting across the main points that you need to. I have to say, my daughter was at an interview last week and they asked her specifically to follow, it wasn't the STAR, it was BAR, but it was the same sort of thing. So you may actually in the interview be asked to do this in this sort of specific way. So start by listening to the question. Think of the example that you're going to use. Hopefully you'll have already prepared one, especially if you've been doing all of my sessions with me. You'll certainly have a lot of questions that you could have prepared. But even if it is something that you haven't prepared an answer for, take a moment just to evaluate it, to think about what you want to say. Frame your answer then into situation, task, action, and result. Describe the event or the situation that you were in. Explain the task that you had to complete. What were the challenges involved in it? Describe the specific actions that you personally took to complete the task. You can say what you did, as a team, but you should also say what you personally did. And then finish with the results. What were the advantages? What were the benefits? What were the savings, perhaps? What was the impact of it? So that's the STAR technique. And I also just want to remind you that we do have an online system called Shortlist Me, where you can practice your interviews basically, from the comfort of your home. It's called Shortlist Me. Karen will put the link into the chat for you, but you can find it on the careers website. It's basically a package that provides interviews from specific companies, lots of big companies like Virgin Media, AstraZeneca, the NHS, but then it also provides some interviews for specific roles like, in law or in banking. So there's a broad range of opportunities for you to practice on. Once you register, you only have 3 days to complete the interview. So just be aware of that. And, it is about the practice. You're not interacting with a real life person. So, you shouldn't be too stressed over it or anything. It's a good opportunity to be able to answer those questions online without having to stress over it. It's not a real person. You will be responding to pre-recorded questions as if it was an online interview. You get some time to prepare your answers and then you give your answers. It's about 5 or 6 questions, I think. And the important thing is then that you get some feedback on how you did. And again, this is automated feedback. So again, you're not interacting with the person. But a very good opportunity. And I think it is available through till about May. So if you have a chance, do go and look at it. Okay, so here are some of the interview questions that you might get asked around this sort of subject. And as I said, recruiters will want indications that you can, stay calm under pressure, adjust your approach to working style, that you can successfully apply new methods or new technologies and tools. Um, so try to focus your examples that'll show how comfortable you can be working in environments that are maybe quick changing, and try to show how open you are to new ideas. So if you've dealt with new challenges, different work demands, and maybe have to come up with some creative solutions to solve problems, then that's all good for the employer to hear. So be thinking along those sort of lines. It's also good to have an example of coming up with, a different solution to something if your first solution didn't work or wasn't accepted by your boss or your teammates. So think of ways maybe to show your adaptability, your flexibility, and your resilience as well. So interview questions then that will try and find out how adaptable, flexible, and agile you are. Might include things like, tell me about a project that you did that didn't go according to plan. What corrections did you make? What were the results? Tell me about a time when you were asked to do something that you'd never done before. How did you respond? Tell me about a time you had to learn new technology or a new approach. What steps did you follow to get started on it? Tell me about a time when you had to adjust your working style in a team project. That might be, excuse me, because of other team members and how they like to work on things differently. Tell me about a time when you have been working on a project that's requirements changed at the last minute. What did you do? So, that is something actually that happens. You're working steadily towards something, you've got your goals, and then the next thing, for whatever reason, everything changes. And some people find that very difficult to do, and others will just get on with it because that's them being learning agile. So something to consider there if you've got any examples of that one. Tell me about your biggest work failure. What did you learn? So I already went through quite a bit of that previously. And then finally, describe a time when you received critical feedback from your boss. How did you handle it? So I think most of those questions I've covered in some shape or form in the session ahead of this. Does anybody have any questions for myself or Karen on any of this?
We don't have anything in the chat, Roisin. So again, I do think people are just processing some really, really useful information that you've just given them.
Anything that springs to mind, Karen, that you might like to add in there at all?
Well, I was just thinking, you know, Roisin, it's kind of all of these, all of this learning, you know, it's so interconnected, you know, but it is just, you know, it is so important because it's what employers are telling us. It's what recruiters are telling us. You know, it's that ability to adapt, to learn, all of the things that you've just covered. They want students to be able to hit the ground running. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything. You know, you're not pre-baked as it was, but they want that attitude. They want that disposition. They want that willingness to have a go and to demonstrate those processes that you've talked about, because that's what's expected in professional life. It's what's expected of you as a professional, whatever profession you may go into. Those are the professional skills that that we all have to demonstrate. So any opportunity that you can get, you know, using Degree Plus, using the activities that we have available in Degree Plus, development weeks, you know, running a student-led event, all of the things that, all of the classes and things that you can get involved in, and push yourself out of that comfort zone, as Roisin said, because it's only when you get those edges rubbed off and you realize that you can, you know, put yourself out there and that you survive and that you might enjoy it and that you do well and that you reflect on it and you learn, and then think about how you can use that in different contexts. So so I think that there's so much to take away from this session. It's very, very applicable, very practical and very applicable. So those are just my thoughts, Roisin.
Yeah, and it's exactly why it's in here, because that's what I was hearing as well, Karen, that it's you know, what employers are asking for now is that learning agility, but it's not necessarily something, a phrase yet, that's in the minds of students and people going, you know about this kind of thing, but it's getting that terminology and getting across, as you said, how you actually want to be able to show that. And you are all doing it, you know, you're all having to do these sort of things anyway. It's about relating it to your experience and being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to finish off by just giving you the details of the next sessions coming up. So we're on learning agility today. I've only one more session, which is working with customers and clients, coming up on the 5th of April. And then we're into development weeks. Hopefully your exams now will all be over and you'll be raring to go for development weeks as well. I have 3 sessions there. 2 of them are in person, those ones in pink. Karen's helped me out in one of those as well. And an online one working in teams. So you might be interested in that too. But as I said, all of the sessions are in the past events on the careers website as well. I am going to stop presenting and stop recording. If anybody wants to, they can come on and ask any questions then. We have another few minutes.
Roisin, I've just put the slides into the chat.
Okay, great.
So I'll just put the feedback form on as well.
You're very welcome, Rachel and Glenn. Okay. I think that's probably us then, Karen.
Yeah, I'm just putting the link to the evaluation form.
Thanks, Alex.
That's it. So that's everything on there.
Great. Okay, that's us pretty much finished then, folks. For some strange reason, it doesn't want to stop recording, but don't know why. I'm sure it will when I finish anyway. All right, Karen, thanks again for your help, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Roisin. Great session.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.